today, David Niose, with the help of the coordination of the Humanists of Southeast Michigan and Michigan Atheists. And we also would like to thank the Temple for letting us host it here. David comes to us from Boston, where he and his wife and 2 sons reside. David currently is the legal director at the AHA Legal Center, running the Massachusetts office. He also has his own legal offices where he is a tort lawyer. David is also the immediate past president of the American Humanist Association, and before that, he was the president of the Secular Coalition for America. In these positions, David has initiated and pursued efforts to advocate for secularism. David also majored in journalism, and with that also worked in print and broadcast media, taught both history and law, and he has written extensively on a wide array of issues. He has 2 books, Nonbeliever Nation, The Rise of the Secular Americans, and Fighting Back the Right, Reclaiming American from the Attack on Reason. I have read Fighting Back the Right, and I'm working on my way through the Nonbeliever Nation. It is a great read, and as much of the chapters are broken down into neat little sections, giving little bits of history that explain and add to each chapter's topic. And on that, I will stop and welcome David Niose.
Thank you very much, Joyce, and thank you all for having me here today. This is a very special venue, and I wanted to visit it for a long time, and I'm really thrilled to be here. As Joyce said, some of my books are for sale out in the Temple Hall there, and it occurred to me it's a good thing Jesus isn't here. You know, as they say, when they ask, what would Jesus do, flipping out and turning over tables is an option. Anyway, I met Sherwin Wine many years ago before he passed away, and he was really a wonderful man. And I met him in Cambridge at an event there, and we had a chance to chat when I was in AHA leadership. And I had always wanted to visit his congregation, and I'm really happy to be here to see it today. And boy, what a beautiful building. If every secular group could have a building like this, imagine what this movement would be like. A little bit about myself. I was raised Catholic. Niose is an Italian name, as you may have guessed. My mother, however, was Irish, so I've got that Irish Catholic thing going on as well. Working class, very much working class Irish Catholic upbringing. And if any of you were raised that way, you know, especially I was born in the 60s, so Irish Catholic mother and a working class household, 1960s, that means there were 2 pictures on the wall in our house. And there was the Pope and JFK. It's just, it was that way at my friends' houses too. It's just the way that it was. And as I got older, I began to realize the irony, you know, that the Pope and JFK got a Catholic leader with no respect for women and the Pope. Anyway, obviously from the title of this talk, the title is The Decline of Reason and Rise of Dysfunction. The topic here is anti-intellectualism, okay? If we could sum it up in one long word, that would be it. And when we talk about anti-intellectualism in American society, it's very easy to just fall back into the complaints that you hear all the time. In fact, I heard someone, we were chatting out there today, you know, Americans are dumb, they're poorly informed, they're watching Fox News and getting misinformed. They know all about the Kardashians, but half of them can't tell you who the vice president is. And you know, that's sad, but true. It's unfortunate, but it's where we are as a society. That said, I really don't want to stand up here today and just echo those complaints, because we all know them and we all hear about them. And I think to a large extent they're true. Certainly the misinformed and disengaged allegations are true. I think we could debate the Americans are dumb part, though. And if you're familiar with Noam Chomsky, he had some very interesting things to say about this accusation that Americans are dumb. He said, you know, they're not so dumb at all. If you talk to any, even just working guy or average American, you know, that they can rattle off statistics quite in depth. Typical guy that you meet at a bar, he can tell you all about sports statistics going back years, who won the pennant in 2003, what so-and-so's batting average was, and you know, who's leading percentage as far as NFL quarterback. Americans are actually quite intelligent. They're capable of absorbing quite a bit of information. The problem is the information they're absorbing, whether it's celebrity trivia or sports trivia or whatnot, it's not really important knowledge. It's not the knowledge that's going to get civic engagement going in a really healthy way. So I think we need to ask ourselves when we talk about anti-intellectualism, maybe back off the whole thing about Americans being dumb and just ask, why are they so misinformed and why are they so disengaged? And I'd like the conversation today to kind of consider a few of those issues. I mean, we've only got a short time. We're not going to solve the problem of American anti-intellectualism today, but maybe we can kind of look at some of the issues from a slightly different angle. One thing, for example, an important point that I'd like to make is, you know, just because we're complaining about anti-intellectualism, that doesn't mean we're saying that everyone has to be an intellectual. Okay, that's very important, especially in humanist groups, because in humanist groups you do tend to get demographics that are highly educated. I've been all around the country to AHA chapters, and you meet a lot of PhDs, you meet a lot of very well-educated people, very intelligent people, and it's easy to then, if that's who you're circulating with, to equate anti-intellectualism or being the problem of anti-intellectualism with people not being educated. But there's more than a bit of elitism in that kind of argument, and we need to really be mindful of it and just be aware, realistically, there's no way everyone's going to have a PhD, okay, a master's degree, advanced degree. No way everyone's going to know all about the classics and be multilingual. It's just not going to happen. So we need to realize that when we're complaining about the problem of anti-intellectualism, we really need to think about, you know, what do we want as an end result? And I'd suggest to you that the typical working person, working man, working woman, with maybe high school education, is still capable of appreciating the importance of being opposed to anti-intellectualism, okay? They should be capable of spotting it and realizing that it's toxic and that it's ruining the political culture and that it's tainting politics. It's ruining the level of discourse in this country. Even average working people are capable of that. And I think that's the direction we want to be going when we're talking about resolving the issue of anti-intellectualism. Another way of saying it is that, you know, we don't need everyone to be an intellectual. We just need everyone to be opposed to anti-intellectualism. A problem in America today is that we have a culture where people are proud to be anti-intellectual. It's actually like a badge of honor from top to bottom in society. Even our leaders are, you know, we've got senators bringing snowballs into the halls of Congress as proof that global warming is a hoax, you know. So, and it goes right through society, right down to our children. You know, our children are of the mindset, especially girls, I hate to say it, but you see this in society where it's not cool to be too smart. You know, you want to be popular, then you don't want to be too smart. You want to, and it varies from community to community, but there's a lot of it, and it is boys too. I'm not singling out girls, but this is a real problem. That you know, being intellectual is being seen as nerdy. You don't really see that all around the world. You see some countries where it's really that the esteemed people are the intelligent, educated people. Something we need to really be mindful of. So let's talk a little bit about anti-intellectualism, where it comes from, and maybe even what can be done about it. First thing I'd like to say about where it comes from, and this is not acknowledged enough, our biology. Okay, before we start talking about cultural problems, we need to realize that our biology, and to a large extent, is wired for anti-intellectualism. We have natural inclinations toward it, We have impulses toward it. It's just the reality of how we are put together. It's not like our natural state is to be spending our time applying the scientific method to the things we're interacting with, thinking independently and critically about things. Not at all. We're primates, apes, and we are capable of rational thought and critical thinking, certainly much more so than other animals. But very importantly, it is not our default position at all contexts at all. Our usual disposition, quite frankly, is to be driven by our emotions and our subconscious impulses. We're prone to herd thinking and group think. We're making uninformed assumptions about people and things around us. We all do it, even those of us with PhDs. It's happening all the time. We are reacting to conditions. We're prone to anxiety and panic and even aggression. The fight or flight instinct is very much alive in our genes as we roam about society today, and it manifests itself through anxiety and through other problems. As social animals, we're jealous, we compare ourselves to others, we naturally compete, and we're tribal. That's a very big one. Us, them thinking is just natural to us, the in-group, the out-group, group thing. Even the most intelligent people you meet are very prone to confirmation bias when they're talking about things. They want to believe the evidence that supports them, and they want to ignore the evidence that rebuts their beliefs and their positions. It's just natural. And I think if you're analyzing anti-intellectualism in society and trying to figure out, navigate your way through it, what's going on here and how can we do something about it, you really need to be aware that this is our biology, that we are wired this way. An objective, critical assessment of everything we interact with is not in our biology. This helps explain why, despite our amazing advances as a species, and there's no denying about that, I mean, think about that, we are just animals, but we've constructed beautiful cities, and we've explored space and done so much to tame the natural world. Despite all that, anti-intellectualism is still very strong throughout society. So it's consistent with our biology. But then you can ask, well, anti-intellectualism isn't so strong everywhere. It's stronger in some areas than in others, and I'm not going to point out any place specific, Alabama. So if we're wired that way, why are some areas more anti-intellectual than others? Well, that brings us to really the second factor. Only the second, though. We really need to be mindful of that first one, our biology, and that is cultural factors, right? It's ingrained in our culture to a certain degree. Let's talk about just a couple of the cultural factors that help promote anti-intellectualism. There was a book written on this subject back in the early 1960s, Richard Hofstadter. I'm sure some of you have read it, Anti-Intellectualism in American Society. It's a marvelous book. After you read my books, you should definitely read it. But Hofstadter won a Pulitzer for Anti-Intellectualism in American Society. If you look at the book, about 40% of it is dedicated to the issue of religion. Okay? Isn't that interesting? Okay, so if you're talking about the problem with anti-intellectualism and you're going to write a Pulitzer Prize-winning book about it, 40% of that book is about the religion in American society. So religion is certainly a major factor in promoting anti-intellectualism. It's a big part of the problem. Now, not all religion, we're sitting here in a religious building, so not all religion is anti-intellectual, but much of it is. Humanism, to the extent it's a religion, is really not an anti-intellectual religion. It embraces reason, right? It looks at evidence and it changes its position if the evidence points to a different position. There's really nothing anti-intellectualism about it. What I've done, I tried to analyze the issue, and I think if you're considering whether a particular religion is anti-intellectual or not, I think what you find out is that there's really a spectrum of how anti-intellectualism a religion could be. There's extremely anti-intellectual, not at all, with humanism down here at the not at all. And then there's in between, and it's the spectrum. Different religions can fall in different places. I figure there's 5 real factors that help determine where a particular religion might fall along that spectrum. First of all, does the religion rely on supernatural explanations for the universe? To the extent it does, it's an anti-intellectual religion. Does the religion encourage superstition? To the extent it does, then it's an anti-intellectual religion. Does it assert facts that are demonstrably false? Yes, to the extent it does, then yes, it's an anti-intellectual. Does it make claims or promises that are simply implausible? Yeah. Does it defend unjust practices, racism, misogyny, that sort of thing, through its theology or its claims of heritage? Because those are both in there. Those 5 factors really will determine just how anti-intellectual religion is. Supernatural explanations. Oh, well, God made the universe. Well, that's a supernatural explanation. It makes no sense. Encouraging superstition. Oh, you lost something, say a prayer to St. Anthony, right? You'll find it. So much superstition. Does it assert facts that are demonstrably false? Well, the Earth is 6,000 years old. Okay, we can run right through these. Does it make claims or promises that are implausible? Well, if you're good, or if you follow what our religion says, you'll spend eternity in heaven. If you're not, you'll spend eternity in hell. Does it make misogynistic, racist claims through heritage and whatnot? Just think of all the defense of racism and misogyny that's been done in the name of Christianity over the years. So that analysis, I would suggest to you, is really an accurate way of assessing. And it's not necessarily pointed to any one religion. It's an objective analysis where you apply it to any particular religion, and you really do come out at the end with an assessment of just how anti-intellectual it is. And it's very important to realize, I think, that not all religions are the same. For example, people point to Buddhism as a religion that's kind of consistent with a secular worldview, and it can be. I would argue that Buddhism certainly is much less anti-intellectual than, say, conservative Christianity. In fact, you can be an atheist and be a Buddhist. It's perfectly fine. Yet there are strands of Buddhism that very seriously believe in reincarnation. Okay? To the extent that's part of your theology, then I would argue that is anti-intellectual. Maybe it's relatively benign and harmless because people aren't changing our laws over it and trying to argue that that belief should somehow infringe on my rights, but it is anti-intellectualism. Deism is an interesting religious outlook to look at through the prism of anti-intellectualism. I'm sure most of you are familiar with what deism is, but it was very popular in the 18th and 19th century. Thomas Jefferson was a deist, Thomas Paine was certainly a deist, and other founding fathers were. The belief is that there was a watchmaker god that may have set things in motion, kind of like this grand mechanic. Because back in those days, that was the way of looking at the world, Newton and all that, there must be mechanical laws that explain the universe. So there was this watchmaker who set everything in action and then walked away. That watchmaker can't be prayed to. He's not even keeping an eye on things. He just set things in motion and walked away. Well, that is certainly a lot less anti-intellectual than more conservative theology, right? It claims that there's this supernatural explanation for the beginning of the universe. That's the watchmaker God technically is a supernatural belief. The tendency to believe in agency is a natural human tendency, though. In fact, it's, as Daniel Dennett has pointed out in his books, it's natural throughout the mammal world to assume agency behind anything that happens. Snow falls off a roof and it scares a dog, it turns around and barks, it assumes there must be a predator there. And that wiring had survival value throughout history. The assumption that there must be agents behind things happening had survival value, and that's why I think as people got more intelligent and looked at the universe and tried to figure it out, they naturally assumed there must be some kind of agency behind it. But that's the extent in deism of the supernatural belief. And it doesn't promote superstition, it doesn't justify misogyny through any kind of theological views, so certainly a lot less. Consider now revelation-based religions, Christianity, Islam, or conservative Judaism. How do they match up with this analysis? Well, not very well, as I already ran through these examples and just pointed to some of the Christian beliefs that fall on the wrong side. Jesus came in fulfillment of the scriptures. Well, what are scriptures? They're revelation, right? Ancient men got revelation, special messages from God. These are people who didn't know where the sun went at night, but they still somehow were communicating with the creator of the universe and writing books that the rest of humanity was supposed to be following for the rest of history. Christianity and all the revelation-based religions assume not only a God, but a God that interacted with ancient men. This God had a son who walked around performing miracles. God the Father had the son sacrificed somehow to save humanity. The theological thickness is laid on so much. You see layer after layer of anti-intellectualism in the theology. And it's interesting that the Christians that we consider less a hindrance to public policy, the liberal Christians, are those who are less devout about the theological beliefs. That there are even Christians who are willing to open up themselves to the idea that maybe Jesus wasn't God, maybe it's all just myth, but we should still be good. So when you start seeing less conservative, less fundamentalist Christians, you find that they are not on that far end of the spectrum because they've let go of the supernaturalism, the superstition to some degree, not completely. But that's how religions move their way over towards the less anti-intellectual side of the spectrum. Part of the problem here is that the religions that are most vocal in our society are the ones that are on the extreme end of the spectrum. You could say religion is dying, and if you look at the demographics, that's kind of true. There are a lot more non-religious people in America today than there were years ago. But it's very curious, very interesting that the ones still left, wow, they sure are vocal, and they're going down fighting if religion is dying. Project Blitz, have you heard of that, for the religious right? They're extremely organized, and they are very wealthy, and they've got resources and energy and people, and they are really doing a much better job impacting public policy, quite frankly, than the rest of us are as a group. I think part of the answer to this religion contributing to anti-intellectualism in American society is something I spell out in Nonbeliever Nation, and that is the importance of normalizing secularity. I think it's a mistake to really expect to convert conservative Christians in great numbers, fundamentalist Christians, into atheists and agnostics. That's not going to happen anytime soon. Every now and then some drop out and they have this epiphany, if you will, and they realize that it's all false. So we see people like that in the movement all the time. I think of Jerry DeWitt, the minister from Louisiana, who all of a sudden one day just woke up and realized that it's just a fraud, and now he's an active secularist. But that's not going to happen on a mass scale, I don't think. But to the extent that we can normalize secularity in American society so that if you are an atheist or agnostic or secular humanist, whatever you want to call yourself, you can be open about it and you can run for office and be respected and not discriminated against. That identity politics, if you will, is an important part of bringing down the religious right, because the religious right loves it, loves the fact that atheist is still kind of seen as taboo in America, that people are uncomfortable about identifying openly as atheists. They love it because that entrenches them all the more. To the extent that family members can stand up and introduce themselves as atheists to friends, family, co-workers, and not be seen as an anomaly, That's what's going to chip away at this religion factor in American society, contributing so much to anti-intellectualism. I'd like to talk about patriotism. This is probably the second biggest factor in contributing to anti-intellectualism in American society. And obviously it connects in some way to our tribalism, right? The tribalism that I said is wired right into us. It's a natural human impulse to be tribal. It's just part of how we act as animals, us versus them. We watch out for us and we're suspicious of them. The interesting thing is that throughout history, the dynamics of tribalism have changed. It used to be clan against clan, then it was tribe against tribe, nation against nation, and it comes at us at certain different levels. Now we've got millions of people together and we call it tribalism still, this nationalism. It's natural, and I think in small doses, it probably is fairly benign, not very dangerous at all. We even see it in sports rivalries. I think that's even kind of an element of tribalism, the way people are so devout to their school team or their professional team. Somehow it's in our blood. The danger with patriotism, though, really is that it very easily transforms into overzealous nationalism and militarism. And it really seems like in our society there's not an awareness of that. It's just seen patriotism all good, always good. No such thing as bad patriotism, never taken too far, but I think clearly it often is. Especially dangerous today with advanced technology. You've got nationalism and militarism with nuclear weapons and weapons of mass destruction. It's got to be seen as a very dangerous phenomenon. Our biology does feed it, though. People are willing to fight, especially young men somehow, without question for their tribe or group. They don't really question, gee, are we fighting for a good cause here? No, more often than not, young men will gladly fight for the tribe without asking too many questions about whether we're really in the right here, doing the right thing. Aggressive impulses can be very easily tapped. People strive for social approval. We're social animals, and that is very important to well-being for most people. So it's very easy to unite behind patriotism. It's very hard to be the dissenter who's going to stand up and say, wait a second, are we doing the right thing here, invading Iraq?